Ever catch yourself doing something, like, totally on autopilot?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
Like reaching for your phone first thing in the morning, or
Exactly.
just knowing you have to have that cup of coffee before anything else?
It's like you don't even think about it, you just do it.
Right. And that's kind of what we're diving into today, the whole how and why of habits. We're going deep into the brain science, the neuroscience, behind how those routines get hardwired in there.
Yeah, we've got some fascinating research here, really unpacking how habits form and stick, and how we can actually use that knowledge to, actually build good ones and maybe break some of the not so good ones.
Because, let's face it, some habits are great.
Hmm,
They make life easier. But then there are those that, well, maybe don't serve us as well as we'd like.
totally. So let's start with the basics. What exactly is a habit from a brain perspective?
So looking at our research, it seems like the basic definition is a behavior or a whole set of actions that we repeat so often it becomes almost subconscious. And the brain does this to save energy, right?
Right, efficiency. Like, think about it. We're bombarded with so much information all the time
Constantly.
that if our brains had to actively think through every little thing, we'd be totally overwhelmed.
We'd be fried.
Exactly. So it makes sense to automate the stuff we do regularly.
But that's where the double-edged sword comes in, right?
Yeah.
Because that same automation can lock us into routines that aren't actually benefiting
Oh,
us.
absolutely. Like, that autopilot can lead you right down the path of least resistance, even if it's not the best path for you long term.
And at the heart of it all is this loop, the cue, the routine, and then the reward.
Like a feedback cycle. And
Sure.
it's honestly the foundation of how any habit forms.
It's so simple but powerful, right? Like with that morning coffee, the smell of it brewing, that's your cue.
Right, the
And
trigger.
then the routine is, well, making the coffee, taking that first sip.
And a reward. Could be the caffeine hit, the taste, the feeling of that warm mug in your hand.
Or maybe it's just that feeling of, okay, now my day can start.
Whatever it is, that reward reinforces the entire loop.
And then you do it again tomorrow and
Yeah.
the next day. And it gets more and more ingrained each time.
Exactly. And where this gets really interesting is that we can actually pinpoint this loop in the brain. Dr. Anne Grabiel's research, she's done some groundbreaking work, shows how the basal ganglia, it's this area deep in the brain, is absolutely essential for habit formation.
So it's not just some abstract idea. It's like there's a physical location where these habits are taking root.
Literally. And her work goes even deeper, showing that as a habit forms, the basal ganglia basically compresses the whole sequence of actions into a single unit.
So it's like zipping a file.
Kind of. The brain is creating a shortcut so you don't have to consciously think through every step each time.
Wow, that's amazing. And our brains are amazing at adapting, constantly rewiring themselves.
Right, and that's where neuroplasticity comes in.
So every time we repeat an action, those neural pathways get stronger, like building a muscle.
Exactly. And it's not just a general strengthening. It's like the synapses, the connections between neurons, they get more efficient. The communication gets faster and faster each time you do the action.
So it's like a path in the woods. The more you walk it, the more worn down it gets, the easier it is to travel.
Perfect analogy. And this whole idea of neuroplasticity and reward pathways, it helps explain why procrastination is such a beast to overcome.
Because we're wired for that instant gratification, even if it screws us over later.
Right. Piers Steele did this huge meta-analysis of procrastination research, and his findings were fascinating. He suggests it's often this conflict in our brains between the immediate reward of not doing the unpleasant thing.
Like that feeling of relief when you push something off.
Exactly. And the delayed reward of actually completing the task.
So we're kind of battling our own brain's wiring.
In a way, yes, because the immediate reward often wins out.
Makes you wonder if our brains are working against us sometimes, you know?
Well, it's more like they evolved to prioritize what was immediately beneficial for survival. But in today's world, it doesn't always translate so well.
That makes sense. And it's not just theory. We have, visual proof of this habit formation happening in our brains.
Oh, yeah, fMRI studies, those are incredible.
They actually show those specific brain regions lighting up as a habit is forming.
You see increased activity, particularly in the basal ganglia, when someone's doing a task repeatedly.
It's literally seeing the habit loop taking shape.
Pretty wild, right?
Totally. But it's not just about how our brains are physically wired. There's also this whole element of our own mental shortcuts getting in the way.
Ah, cognitive biases.
Yeah, those sneaky things. And it seems like they play a huge role in why we cling to certain habits, especially when we know they're not the best for us.
Oh, yeah. They're powerful. They're like these little mental tricks our brains use to simplify things to make decisions quickly.
And it's efficient, but sometimes it backfires, right?
Big time. Like, take the status quo bias, for example.
Oh, I know this one. It's like I'm comfortable with how things are, even if it's not great.
Exactly. We're wired to resist change because our brains see it as a potential loss. Even if sticking with the status quo is worse in the long run, it's like, better the devil you know.
So we're kind of hardwired to stay in our comfort zones, even when they're not actually that comfortable.
Sometimes, yeah. It's a weird paradox. And then you've got the optimism bias, which is another sneaky one.
Oh, the it won't happen to me bias.
Yep. We tend to underestimate the risks of our bad habits and overestimate our ability to change them.
Like, I can quit smoking anytime I want.
Exactly. But often it's way harder than we anticipate because our brains are tricking us into thinking it's no big deal.
So we're up against our brain's wiring and these mental biases. So how do we even begin to rewire those habits?
Well, the good news is there are strategies, and they're backed by science. Our sources go into some really practical techniques. One that I find particularly helpful is mindfulness meditation.
Okay, so how does mindfulness help with all this ingrained stuff?
Well, mindfulness is all about becoming more aware of what's happening in our minds and bodies without judgment. And this awareness is key because it creates space between the cue and our automatic response.
Like hitting the pause button.
Exactly. We learn to observe the urge, the craving, the thought, whatever it is, without immediately reacting.
So we can see what's driving the habit.
Right. And that awareness lets us start to identify the underlying biases or emotions that are fueling the behavior.
So we're not just mindlessly reacting, we're taking control.
And there's another technique called cognitive restructuring, which is about consciously challenging those negative or unhelpful thought patterns that often lead to bad habits.
So like talking back to that little voice in your head that's saying, just one more cookie.
Exactly. You start questioning those thoughts, looking for evidence to support or refute them, and eventually replacing them with more helpful ones.
Interesting. So mindfulness and cognitive restructuring, they're all about bringing more conscious awareness into the picture.
Absolutely. Because awareness is the first step to change.
Makes sense. And our sources also talk about interrupting the habit loop itself. It sounds straightforward, but how do we actually do that?
So you literally change your response to the cue. Like, let's say your alarm goes off, that's your cue.
And the routine is hitting snooze 5 times.
Right. But instead of that, you immediately get out of bed and do a quick stretch or drink a glass of water.
So you're inserting a new action in response to the trigger.
Exactly. You're hijacking the old pathway and starting to forge a new one.
Makes sense. And another really practical tip is habit tracking. Our sources emphasize being super detailed with this.
Yes, the more detail, the better, especially when you're first starting out.
So like, what exactly should we be tracking?
Everything. Not just whether you did the habit or not, but also the specific cue that triggered it, the exact routine you followed, and the reward you experienced afterward.
Both the immediate feeling and any long-term benefits.
Exactly, because tracking all of this helps you see patterns in your behavior that you might not even be aware of.
So you can spot those sneaky triggers and figure out what's really driving the habit.
Right. And then you can start experimenting with different ways to change those triggers or rewards.
I like this idea of becoming a habit detective, like investigating your own behavior.
It can be really eye-opening. And another technique that builds on this awareness is habit stacking.
That's the one where you piggyback a new habit onto an existing one, right?
Yep. It's a really smart strategy because you're leveraging the power of an already established habit. Like if you always brew coffee first thing in the morning, you could try adding a new habit right after that, like 5 minutes of meditation.
Because that coffee routine is already automatic, so it becomes a reliable cue for the new behavior.
Exactly. You're creating this little chain reaction of positive actions.
Smart. And what about the power of our thoughts? Our sources mention visualization. Can simply imagining yourself doing something actually make a difference?
Oh, absolutely. Visualization is more powerful than people think. Our brains respond to mental imagery in surprisingly similar ways to real actions.
So it's like a mental reversal.
Exactly. And when you vividly imagine yourself successfully performing the habit, especially reaching your goals, your brain releases dopamine.
That's the feel-good neurotransmitter.
Yep, the same one that gets released when you actually experience a reward. So by visualizing, you're kind of giving yourself a little hit of dopamine, reinforcing the neural pathways associated with that habit.
It's like tricking your brain into thinking you've already done it.
In a way, yeah. It's priming your brain for success. And speaking of motivation, tangible rewards can be really helpful too.
So like giving yourself a little treat for sticking with a new habit.
Exactly. It could be something small like watching an episode of your favorite show after a workout or enjoying a piece of chocolate after finishing a tough task.
And the reward helps solidify the connection between the cue, the routine, and that positive feeling.
Right. It's like giving your brain a little bonus for doing the right thing. As the habit gets stronger, the intrinsic reward, like the feeling of accomplishment, often becomes enough to keep you going.
Now, our sources mention insights from some big names in the field, like Dr. Wendy Wood and Dan O'Reilly, even though we don't have direct quotes. What are some of the key takeaways from their research on why habits are so hard to break?
Well, both Dr. Wood and Airlie emphasize that habits are deeply ingrained because, like we talked about, our brains love efficiency, and we've repeated these behaviors so many times. Dr. Wood particularly highlights the influence of our environment, how our surroundings can unconsciously shape our habits even more than our intentions.
So it's not just about willpower, it's about setting up your environment for success.
Right. And Dan O'Reilly's research is fascinating because it shows how irrational we can be, how even tiny cues can influence our choices without us even realizing it.
So we're not always as in control as we think we are.
Sometimes no. And their work really highlights that willpower alone isn't enough. We need strategies that target the cues, the routines, and the rewards.
It's like a multi-pronged approach. Now, it sounds like this understanding of habit neuroscience has applications beyond just our personal lives, right?
Absolutely. It's relevant in so many areas. Like in the workplace, understanding habit formation can help improve productivity, teamwork, and even leadership.
Because you can identify those unproductive habits and start to shift them.
Exactly. And on a broader scale, this knowledge can inform public health initiatives aimed at promoting healthier habits across society.
So it's really about understanding how our brains work so we can create positive change on multiple levels.
Right, it's empowering. Our source also mentions step-by-step exercises to help people create personal action plans for habit transformation.
So what might that look like?
Well, you start by picking one specific habit you want to change. Then you analyze the habit loop. What triggers it? What's the exact routine? And what's the reward you're getting from it?
And once you understand that, you can start experimenting with different strategies, like finding new routines, tweaking the rewards, using habit stacking, or visualization.
It's a process of trial and error, figuring out what works best for you.
And our material also talks about inspiring success stories from people who've actually changed their habits for good. What are some common threads in those stories?
One thing that stands out is that people who successfully change their habits really understand their own triggers and rewards. They're honest with themselves about what's driving the behavior.
They've done that detective work we talked about.
Right. And they put in the effort consistently, replacing old routines with new ones. They're persistent and patient with themselves, understanding that it takes time.
So it's not about being perfect, it's about progress.
Exactly. And it seems that those who focus on small, consistent changes tend to be more successful in the long run.
It's that whole slow and steady wins the race idea.
Exactly. And as we wrap up, it's important to remember that this field is constantly evolving.
What are some of the latest developments in habit research?
We're seeing incredible advancements in brain imaging and AI. Researchers are now using AI to analyze huge data sets of behavior to identify personalized patterns and triggers.
So we're getting even better at understanding how habits form.
Right. And there's this whole new area of wearable neurofeedback devices that are being developed.
What's that?
It's technology that can give you real-time feedback on your brain activity related to habits.
Wow, that's amazing. So
Ah,
we could potentially see what's happening in our brains as we're trying to change a habit.
exactly. It's like having a window into your own mind. And we're also seeing more and more apps and digital tools that are designed to help people with habit change.
So technology is playing a bigger role in this whole process.
Absolutely. It's making these interventions more accessible and engaging for people.
So let's sum up. What are the key things you want our listeners to take away from our deep dive today?
Well, first, remember that habit loop. Cue, routine, reward, that's the foundation.
It's all about that loop.
Right. And understand that your brain is incredibly adaptable. It can change. But also remember that you have more control over your habits than you might think.
By identifying your triggers, changing your routines, and understanding what truly rewards you, you can rewire your habits and make lasting positive changes.
It might not be easy, but it's definitely possible.
And as we've been saying, it's often the small, consistent efforts that lead to the biggest transformations.
Absolutely. And for our listeners, here's something to ponder. Think of one small habit you'd like to start working on. What's a specific cue you've noticed? What's a new routine you could try? And what reward, even something small, could you link to that new behavior?
And if you're interested in going even deeper, we've got a bonus segment where we'll be exploring the psychology of rewards, why some are more effective than others, and the surprising role that sleep plays in habit formation.
Sleep is so important for our overall well-being, and it turns out it has a huge impact on our ability to form and break habits.
Who knew? Well, thanks so much for joining us on this deep dive into the amazing world of habit neuroscience.
It's been a pleasure. Remember, understanding how your brain works is the first step to taking control of your habits and creating the life you want.
We'll be back soon with another deep dive into a new topic. Until then, we'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences as you start experimenting with your own habits. You can connect with us on insert social media handles or contact info. Thanks for listening.
See you next time.